I mean, I think that's kind of the natural progression. You know, growing up, I was into, you know, a lot of punk and stuff like that. And, you know, all those songs are, you know, they're not wrong about pointing out all the, you know, injustices and whatnot in the world. They're like, those are real things. But as I get older, I was like, is it really helping anyone for all of us to just like list out all these things that are wrong? Like maybe a little bit, but you reach the point of diminishing marginal returns on that pretty quickly of like raising awareness. Like, okay, awareness has been raised. Now what? You know, and that's the part. That's the part where most people kind of tap out.
Yeah,
because it's hard.
It's great to understand the differences, but I think things only get done when there's a common ground found.
Yeah.
Which is kind of working against finding differences, or, you know, finding the or walking into a room and going, hey, that's different. Is
and trying to browbeat someone into agreeing with you.
No, it's not.
It's just that has never worked ever.
I don't think so. No. It's all you're doing is creating somebody that harbors some hatred because they feel they've not been heard.
Right. And they haven't been.
No, this is it. They've not been given a place around the table. This is why, like, in the UK, we don't have representation of anything that's outside of the mainstream in terms of like politics and that. We have even the theatre of Parliament, for example, is about people stood on the opposite sides of a table shouting at each other. Right. Well, no wonder everybody hates everybody. Like, they've got a place around the table, but there's two sides. Like, come on, let's try to have proportional representation of people's opinions. It doesn't matter how small and niche their opinion is, at least they've got a voice. And I do wonder if that's where a lot of our troubles stem from. That right from the root, we're talking from a perspective as if it's black and white, you know, a subject, I mean to say, as if there's a right and a wrong. There's surely no, there's a what's happening now rather than a universal truth to it.
Well, politically, I think it scores more points to just dig in your heels and accuse whatever the enemy, blame everything wrong on the enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's politically the better strategy rather than trying to find compromise. I mean, people don't really reward that because I think, not to get too like philosophical or whatever, but I think a lot of the way that human psychology works was created in a world that doesn't resemble the world in which we live in now. In other words, it was rational to be afraid of outsiders 20,000 years ago. If you saw somebody, you know, out on the plains, they, you know, when you're both hunting saber-toothed tigers, they might try to kill you. And so it's rational to be afraid of outsiders in that situation. We don't live in that world anymore, but our brain still does.
Yeah, society hasn't quite caught up, has it? Which is going to be an interesting next sort of...
we need a firmware update.
We sure do, man. And I mean, we're going to have one imposed upon us, I think, simply by the state of things. There's going to be a complete paradigm shift in how we live. So, yeah, I guess we're going to have to figure that one out pretty quick. And it certainly won't be dusty old men that figure it out. I think it's going to be it's going to be really interesting to see, not just from politics but from art as well. Yeah. Where is music going to go in a world that is dangerous as hell? What is art going to represent? And I'm hopeful because I think it always lives on the fringes at the best, or the best art lives on the fringes at the best of times. So what's it going to be like when, because looking at the horrors of like the last century, I'm not sure I know the art that was happening at that point, because I guess there wasn't a way for it to be distributed in, but now we've got instant access to art from the furthest reaches of like the most rural parts of the world.
Right.
So it's going to be pretty interesting if art drives people in, like we were just discussing.
I think it does. I mean, maybe it's hard to point to any one piece of art at any one point in time and say after this song or movie came out, sometimes that happens, but in aggregate, I mean, I remember, growing up in the 80s, all the movies were about, toxic waste, the Russians, and aliens, like interstellar aliens. Yeah. And it's like the threat of like nuclear war, because that was hanging over everybody's head at the time, and so you can really see from the art at any given moment where people's heads were at and what things they were like existentially terrified of.
Oh God. I mean, what's going to come out in the next few years?
I mean, everyone's terrified of everything, This
is the worry. Yeah. I mean, I suppose if we end up just loving the most hedonistic crap, then that maybe
which we will, because our brains are optimized for that. Our brains are optimized for a world in which resources are scarce. True. Eat as much as you can, fuck as quickly as you can, so you can reproduce before you die.